Stanley Kubrick is one of the most notorious film directors of the 20th century. He began exploring the art of filmmaking in the 1950s by making documentaries financed by friends and relatives, but soon found fame with extremely popular movies financed by the big movie studios. His films are often characterized by dramatic visual styles, meticulous attention to detail, and a detached, often ironic or pessimistic perspective on life. An expatriate, Kubrick was nearly as well known for his reclusive lifestyle in the English countryside as for his painstaking approach to researching, writing, photographing, and editing his much debated films. While Stanley Kubrick has only made 13 films, they contain huge ideas and seem inexhaustibly rich in meaning and significance. Up to this day, his movies attract incredible enthusiasm from scholars, making him one of the few directors to be considered an auteur. After all, to be considered an auteur is pretty much the highest honor as a director. Most movies have a lot of different people contributing to the final product, but an auteur insists on having the final say and hates it when studios and producers compromise his vision. Kubrick, being known for perfection and sometimes filming over 50 takes for one shot, is the true definition of what an auteur is. That being said, this is the second part of my three-part retrospective on Stanley Kubrick. The first video focused on his early years, following him through his early documentary films to box office flops, to finally getting recognition with the release of Spartacus in 1960. Do check it out if you are curious about his early years. As for this video, I will explore his career from the 1960s to the mid-1970s. After the success of Spartacus, Kubrick and Harris made a decision to film his next project, Lolita, in England. This was due to the clauses on the contract by Warner Brothers that gave them complete control over every aspect of the film, and the fact that there was an incentive at the time that would allow producers to write off the cost of 80% off the crew if they were British. They did eventually sign a $1 million deal with Associate Artists Production, giving them the artistic freedom that they desired. Lolita was released in 1962 and was Kubrick's first attempt at black comedy. This movie was an adaptation of Vladimir Nabokov's novel of the same name. The film follows Professor Humbert, a middle-aged literature lecturer who becomes infatuated with Dolores Hayes, nicknamed Lolita, a young adolescent girl. Because of his restriction by the motion picture code, the film toned down the most provocative aspects of the novel, sometimes leaving much to the audience's imagination. After all, the actress playing Lolita, Sue Lyon, was only 14 at the time of filming. This movie was a transition to Kubrick's naturalistic cinema to the surrealism of his later movies. Because of the provocative nature of the movie, this was the first film of Kubrick's career to generate controversy. He was ultimately forced to comply with censors and remove much of the more heated parts of the relationship between Humbert and Lolita. Even though this movie wasn't a critical success, over time Lolita has become acclaimed by critics. In 1964, Kubrick released his next project, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This was another satirical black comedy. This movie was developed because throughout the 1950s, Kubrick was preoccupied with the issues of nuclear war as the Cold War unfolded in the 1950s. After buying the rights to the novel Red Alert and collaborating with its author Peter George, he developed the script Dr. Strangelove. Originally, this movie was supposed to be a serious political thriller, but Kubrick decided that a serious treatment on the subject would be unbelievable. The story of the movie follows an unhinged United States Air Force general who orders a first strike nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. It separately follows the President of the United States, his advisors, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a Royal Air Force exchange officer as they attempt to prevent the crew of a B-52 plane from nuking the Soviets and starting an atomic holocaust. Dr. Strangelove was filmed over 15 weeks, after which Kubrick spent 8 months editing it. Peter Sellers ended up playing 3 roles in the film. Upon its release, the film stirred up much controversy and mixed opinions. Many people at the time found that this movie discredited the whole defense establishment of the time. But over time, Dr. Strangelove has been named the 39th greatest American film and 3rd greatest American comedy film by the American Film Institute. In 1968, Kubrick released 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is actually the movie that really made Kubrick into a groundbreaking director. 2001 took 5 years to develop and was written in collaboration between Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote the novel of the same name. The film's theme, the birthing of one intelligence by another, is developed in 2 parallel intersecting stories on 2 very different timescales. One depicts the evolutionary transition between various stages of man from ape to star child, as man is reborn into a new existence, each step shepherded by an enigmatic alien intelligence seen only in its artifacts. A series of inexplicable, indestructible old black monoliths. Whereas in space, there's an enemy computer known as HAL who runs the spaceship. In order to make this movie, and in Kubrick's attention to detail, he spent an enormous amount of time researching each detail, in particular paying attention to the accuracy and detail and what the future might look like. Kubrick was even granted permission by NASA to observe the spacecraft being used in the Ranger 9 mission for accuracy. 2001: A Space Odyssey was conceived as a cinerama spectacle and photographed in Super Panavision 70, giving the viewer a dazzling mix of imagination and science through groundbreaking effects. On a deeper level, 2001: A Space Odyssey symbolizes the search for God and revolves around metaphysical conceptions. This movie was criticized at first by critics for lack of dialogue, slow pacing, and a seemingly incomprehensible storyline. 2001 defied conventions of the time, being completely unlike any other science fiction of the time. Kubrick was particularly mad at initial reviews, but with time the movie gained enormous popularity and has become one of the greatest and most influential films ever made. After the epicness of this movie, Stanley Kubrick started looking for a project that he could film quickly on a moderate budget. That project became the 1971 film A Clockwork Orange and was a direct result of the contemporary concerns in 1969 of the new Hollywood movement and how it was creating a great number of films that depicted the sexuality and rebelliousness of young people. For this movie, Kubrick abandoned the use of CinemaScope, deciding that the 1.61:1 widescreen format was an acceptable compromise between spectacle and intimacy, favoring a symmetrical framing which increased the beauty of its composition. The story of Clockwork Orange is set in an England of the future, where Alan and his droogs spend their nights getting high at the Korova milk bar before embarking on ultra-violent sprees. After being jailed for beating a cat lady to death, Alex submits to behavioral modification techniques to earn his freedom. Returning to the world defenseless, Alex becomes the victim of his prior victims. Because of its depiction of teenage violence, A Clockwork Orange became one of the most controversial films of its time and part of an ongoing debate about violence and its glorification in cinema. This movie was actually pulled from cinemas and completely unavailable legally in the UK until after Kubrick's death, and not re-released until the 2000s. Now, this movie is regarded by some critics as one of the most brilliant piece of cinematic art ever made, and more so an intellectual argument rather than a sadistic spectacle. Nevertheless, it did receive 4 Academy Award nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing. In 1975, Stanley Kubrick released Barry Lyndon, which is an adaptation of William Makepeace Thackeray's The Luck of Barry Lyndon. This movie was produced by Warner Brothers on the condition that Kubrick approach major Hollywood stars to act in it, ensuring its box office success. As for the film, it tells the story of a likable young Irishman who changes into a conniving, manipulative rogue. The protagonist finds himself homeless after taking part in a fake duel and is captured by Prussian highwaymen and meets up with a spy, but his fortunes change when he marries a wealthy, titled woman in order to secure his future. In Kubrick fashion, and since the movie is set in the 18th century, Kubrick and his art department did enormous amounts of research in order to make everything portrayed on screen as accurate as possible. Even the paintings that were used to decorate the walls of the sets were meticulously replicated works of the great masters of the period. The film was shot on location in Ireland for authenticity, but was plagued with a problematic production due to the heavy rains and political strife involving Northern Ireland at the time. After receiving death threats from the IRA in the new year of 1974, he and his family fled Ireland and filming was resumed in England. Barry Lyndon was the film which made Kubrick notorious for paying scrupulous attention to detail, often demanding 20 or 30 retakes of the same scene to perfect his shots. Again, innovating in lighting and camera techniques of the time, this movie used Zeiss camera lenses with an adapted high-speed f-stop of 0.7, which is pretty crazy. That means that the lenses were able to film in almost pure darkness. Barry Lyndon found a great audience in France, but was a box office failure. The pace and length of the movie at 3 hours put off many American critics and audiences, but the film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards and won 4, including Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, and Best Musical Score. Well, this concludes the second video in my 3-part retrospective on Kubrick. As you can tell, genius doesn't always correlate with box office successes, and sometimes art is so avant-garde that it will only be really appreciated by future audiences. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Leave me a comment too if you'd like to share something about Stanley Kubrick. There's so much info around that covering it completely would take many more videos. Well, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.